Today on the podcast, I had the absolute privilege of interviewing Simon Drew. Simon is an artist, a musician, a composer. He's also the author of The Poet and the Sage, which we talk about on this episode. Simon is also the founder of The Walled Garden, which is a podcast and an online community. Along with some of Simon's close mentors, he is building a community of philosophers, artists, and seekers who are dedicated to the pursuit of wisdom, virtue, and the divine, wherever it may be found. In this conversation, we even dove a little bit into spirituality, the stoic philosophy, and the overall pursuit of personal freedom. I certainly enjoyed this conversation with Simon. It left me feeling enlightened and inspired, and overall just feeling very energized. And I think it will do the same for you. Enjoy. Welcome to the Playful Life podcast. I'm your host, Crystal. Growing up, I struggled with my weight, self-confidence, and body image, and like many in my teens, I developed an eating disorder. I battled codependent behavior, and it all affected my mental health. As the years went by, I learned and grew in healing, and I found serenity, really in empowering others to let go of their pasts and to embrace their own leadership in their health and well-being. Now it is my mission as a coach, author, speaker, and podcast host to inspire and empower you to live your best, most playful life. On this podcast, you will hear from our guests about their personal struggles and breakthroughs in their health, careers, and relationships. You'll also receive tips, knowledge, and inspiration to tackle your own health goals and start living the dreams on your heart. Ready? Let's play. Welcome to the Playful Life.
Crystal, it is awesome to be here with you. Thanks so much for having me. This is great.
Yes, of course. And I was interviewed by you just a couple weeks ago, so I don't know where these episodes will air on the internet, but I'm so honored to reciprocate that and now have you on my show and get to ask you all the questions I want to know about you. So Simon, I followed your podcast for a while now. Used to be the Practical Stoic, and now it's the Walled Garden. So maybe just let's start there. How did this sort of like come about, and when were you like, I'm going to start a podcast about stoicism? I'm so intrigued.
Yeah, well, man, that was back in 2017, and I guess during that time, I had been doing a lot of what you might say soul searching. And somebody who, it was actually Tim Ferriss who recommended that people read Seneca's letters, the epistles from Seneca the Younger. And, so I kind of, was obsessed with people like Tim Ferriss at the time. And I was like, great, okay, his recommendation, I'm going to go do this. And I had been reading a lot of personal development books. And then when I read Seneca's letters, I was like, man, this is like the source, this is, I had never really been exposed to philosophy. I had been exposed to a lot of personal development stuff, which has its place, of course, but philosophy really just, it completely switched the way that I view a lot of modern personal development stuff, because so much of it comes from these ancient, timeless ideas that have really, as you might say, stood the test of time. And so I just really found a kinship with Seneca and his writings. And from there, I got very interested in Stoic philosophy. And I was a kind of entrepreneurial kind of person. I thought, okay, well, if I'm interested in this, then surely there are other people who are interested in this. And I just kind of felt like the best way for me to learn was to help other people to learn. And I kind of took the approach that if maybe I'm a little bit further along on my journey of learning what Stoicism it is, then I can bring people along on that journey with me. And that's kind of what happened, because, well, I'll tell you, that the first day that I posted an episode, this was so funny. the very first episode on the very first day, I got this email from a listener. It was just so funny that this is the first day. He sent me this email basically saying, you've got this wrong, you've got this wrong, you've got this wrong, do better. and, and I thought, oh my gosh, and it was a good little wake-up call for me, but nonetheless, it was it's interesting to see that over the years, I still get people saying to me, hey, those earlier episodes of the Practical Stoic podcast were so transformative for me in bringing me into an understanding of the Stoic philosophy. And even though I was not as perhaps knowledgeable as I should have been at that time, I think that the fact that I started so early on in my journey learning Stoicism actually brought people along with me on that journey. And so now we're getting into the really nitty gritty, theological concepts of Stoicism that perhaps I had no idea about back then. But it's, if people go back and listen to the start and then go all the way through, then what's going to happen is that they'll get the evolution of my thinking. They'll start to see that there's an adventure that I'm going on, and you can kind of go from, say, the personal development world all the way through to the more sophisticated concepts of Stoicism. And I will just say that those earlier episodes of the Practical Stoic, I actually ended up putting them on my Patreon and on the Walled Garden, but I'm reconsidering whether I should just release them back into the wild. And, because so many people did get so much value out of them, and I'd like for there to be that full picture there at this time. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into it.
That's so cool. And I think just the process is really, to me, like what the Stoic philosophy is about too. It's about learning, it's about growth, and like you're saying, personal development. So to be transparent, be like, I don't know all the answers, but I'm searching for them. And I think that's what attracted a lot of people to you initially, was that, yeah, I'm not an expert about this, but I'm interested in this. And here's somebody talking about this topic that's often very intellectual and very heady, and, just kind of taking it and being like, well, here, I don't know, this is what I think about it, which is, I think, why you've had such good success. So I love Tim Ferriss too. My husband and I were just talking about how we are, embarking on this journey to live abroad for a month, and like how we would not have ever thought about doing that or structuring our lives in a certain way or our finances if we hadn't both read the 4-Hour Work Week. So I love that you're a fan of his. And I'm curious, like when you first were like, what is this, Seneca, and what is this Stoicism? Like, was there something that grabbed you in? Like, is there a feeling or maybe a certain part of that philosophy or something that you read in particular that really resonated with you that was like, yes, I see that there's some good nuggets here to keep going?
Yeah. I think I was already primed to get interested in philosophy, and probably particularly Stoicism, just because of all the reading of personal development books. But, I've been really thinking about this because Seneca, most people who read Seneca's writings are going to feel a real personal touch to his writings, because he is writing letters, and it almost appears that he's writing them directly to you. And I mean, he is writing them directly to you, because he says in his third letter, I believe it is, that I'm writing this for the future generations, that they'll have something to, to hold on to, really, philosophically. And you see that in his writings. And I've been really thinking about why the classical texts are having such a reemergence in terms of their popularity in our modern world. And I think I've stumbled upon something. Okay, so they were having a real experience of personal enlightenment, you say, through these philosophical principles. And when they had that experience, and when they're writing, when they're writing down their deepest thoughts and intuitions about, the nature of reality and our experience as human beings, and how we can lean more in towards flourishing, and away from those things that do not serve us. They're not writing those things because somebody said, hey, listen, the market really wants this book right now, so we need you to write this. And they're not writing this because somebody said, hey, listen, stoicism is really popular right now, so you should write a book about stoicism. And they're not necessarily writing it to pump you up, to motivate you. They're writing the goods of their soul. They're writing the adventure that they're going on internally, and they're experiencing these things, and they're transferring that knowledge of that experience to us. And I think that has a lot to do with the reason why I personally felt so in love. I fell so much in love with these ancient texts, is because they're writing from this beautiful place. It is really the goods of their soul that they're searching for, and that comes out in the beauty of the writing. Like, I've been thinking about that because there are a lot of books out there that's like, here's your 10 steps to stoicism, or here's how to be a stoic, or here's how to become this thing. But they didn't write like that, and it wasn't that simple to them. They were wrestling with problems that were so fundamental to humanity. So I think that's been, for me, the reason why I've gone back to the ancient texts. It kind of takes away the influence of the market, you might say, and you kind of get the source of what everybody else is writing about today.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I totally agree. When I go back and read that stuff, even the Bible, right? It's not like that was written as like a way to market. They were writing this book so that they could get you into this funnel so that you'd sign up for like these coaching sessions, right? I think.
Although you could say that Christianity is the best funnel that was ever created.
Perhaps, yeah. That's very funny.
But I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious about two things. So I know that you are an author yourself, and we'll talk about that for sure. But I also remember hearing that you were going like to university and studying some theology. And so I'm guessing that it was sort of like because you were inspired by these ancient writings and things like that. So like what did inspire you, and what was your journey with that and your experience? And are you still on that journey?
Yeah, well, definitely still on that journey, and there's probably going to be no end. But there are a few things that led me to now studying a Master of Divinity. Okay, let's have a think here. So number one is, yes, deeply interested in the theology of Stoicism. I started to really wake up to the fact that so many of the texts that I had read, I had kind of skipped over the parts where they were talking about God. And then I realized, hang on, like all of the ancient Stoics were talking about God at some point or another. And they were wrestling with deep theological concepts. Then I started to see, oh, hang on, St. Paul spent a lot of time in Rome with philosophers, including Stoic philosophers. And I started to see, oh, okay, so there's these rumors that even Seneca may have actually met with Paul at some point and had conversations with him. And the whole world of religion and philosophy and theology, and it's all so much more intermingled and interconnected back in those ancient times than what we might first imagine. I was deeply inspired by the work of Jordan Peterson as well, and I wouldn't cite him as the only reason why I decided to study a Master of Divinity. But what I would say is that through his work and through Stoicism, I started to really wake up to this idea that I have a true individual nature within me that is the goods of my soul, as Seneca would say. And my job is to find out what those goods are and to allow them to come out into the world, into the light. And this is where I'm going to bring in the book that I've just written, because I think that the major thing that pushed me in the direction of studying a Master of Divinity was having the experience of writing The Poet and the Sage, because that experience was my first truly artistic experience. And I think it was my first truly I want to say religious, but that's the wrong word. Experience of being connected with something that you might say is higher than this body and this little earthly experience that I'm having here. Because the artistic experience, if it's true, is always one of being moved rather than you being the mover, right? It's an experience of allowing yourself to let go and to allow something to come through you onto the page or through the instrument. And so at the time of writing The Poet and the Sage, I was having this experience with both poetry and also my music playing, because I was learning piano at the time, and that was a completely transformative experience of, and I learned it in a different way. I wasn't forcing myself in any direction. I was trying to be very free with my approach to it. But then with the writing, you know, here's the thing, Crystal, I never thought that I would be a poet ever in my life. My dad is a beautiful poet, so it makes sense to me that that's in my nature.
Oh,
And he
wow. That's
writes
very cool.
beautifully, right? But I never thought, because I was never interested in poetry. But when I started writing The Poet and the Sage, what started coming out was poetry, and it was deep symbolism and archetypal metaphor and all these very strange ideas, and it was theology and philosophy. And so that experience just showed me, when I finished The Poet and the Sage, I looked back and I thought, what the hell was that? What just happened? And so I kind of said to people, well, I'll spend about a year to a year and a half writing this book, and I'm probably going to spend the rest of my life figuring out what the hell happened. And so that's really why I'm going back to study divinity. Is I'm really interested now in, I think for me personally, I've seen that my nature is pushing me in the direction of dealing with matters of the soul, both as an artist, as a musician, as a poet, and hopefully in the future as a theologian. So,
Yes, that is wild. And I think we could bring in the topic of music too, because like
yeah, I see your
music,
guitar behind you. Is that a
yeah,
piano
so
there
we're
too? Yeah,
musicians. My piano, yeah, we got guitars. So my husband and I are both musicians,
beautiful.
and songwriters, and yeah, sometimes you just sit down at the piano or whatever instrument and create, right? There's like this flow state that people get in, and you don't necessarily know. I mean, some people might find a formula to it, like that go to school for music and they learn about that and structuring chords. Like that's never been my approach. My approach is just, I don't know, I'm going to play something and see if it sounds good, and if it sounds good to me and I feel like it's going somewhere, I'm going to continue like with the writing process. So I think that's really like brave of you to sort of let that flow come out of you with The Poet and the Sage. And like how fascinating now that you can look back on this and like have a whole nother experience going back and reading through it and talking about it. And I know you even said maybe to have some conversations about it, like on your podcast or with your community at the Walled Garden, because there's
Mm.
so much more to learn from that. Uh, and I want to bring back to that topic of like a higher power, right? And I love that Master of Divinity. I don't think I've ever heard of that, so now I'm intrigued. But I feel like I'm studying that maybe just in my life and being
Mm.
on my own Stoic journey and having the practices and doing them every day and being in that personal development space. So, and I find it interesting. And I know you've had a couple episodes on your show about that, like the topic of God and Stoicism, because I feel that maybe in modern times, people have a real maybe misunderstanding of Stoicism and thinking that it's very godless,
Mm.
and that maybe it attracts atheists, it attracts people who don't conform to any kind of theology or religion or any kind of spiritual practice. And I feel like it's such the opposite. I mean, at least for me. So I guess, what was that journey like for you? And did you always have sort of like that compass of a higher power, or was that something that changed for you, developed for you as you went through that discovery?
Yeah, well, okay, how far back do I go here? Well, I was actually raised as a Mormon, and so that was my upbringing. Was being really deeply grounded in these ancient texts, and of course, the Mormon sacred text that accompanies the Bible, which is the Book of Mormon. And so, I was in seminary, I was learning from the Bible, and my parents did bring me up in certain values, but nonetheless, I was somewhat of a lazy student as a kid, and you know, there were certain things that led me away from the church, and I still haven't returned. But nonetheless, I was led away, and over time, I kind of just went into the standard secular world. I'm really grateful that I somehow managed to leave the church without harboring any sort of resentment in my heart towards the traditions of my youth. I mean, I have nothing but respect for the organization, that is the Mormon Church. They're very beautiful people, and very industrious people, and there's so many amazing people who raised me as a kid, but nonetheless, I was in that kind of secular space. And I'll say something about this because you mentioned stoicism and how it perhaps attracts atheists, or people can get the idea that it's a philosophy of atheism, or because I remember there was one turning point for me where somebody joined my Facebook group, and there was a question when you joined the Facebook group, which was, why are you here? And this person said, well, I'm excited to learn more about a godless philosophy. And I thought, is it? That was just a turning point for me to see somebody say that. I thought, I don't know if it is. And then I started thinking, I don't know anything, and and I'll tell you, I went back and I started kind of going through these texts, just very simply, just glancing at things. Where are they talking about God? I realized that during my kind of more secular phase, I had been reading these texts from the mind of somebody who was seeking personal development. And so if there is a passage that talked about God, it wasn't of interest to me. I didn't see it. And the reason I know I didn't see it is because I like to highlight my books. And I would notice that there were passages where I would highlight this part right here, right? And then right below it, the very next lines, Epictetus might start talking about God. And it might actually be something that resolves the passage above it. But I didn't highlight the passage about God, right? And so I wasn't even seeing the things that they were saying about God. And I just started to think, whoa, all of them are talking about God in these very, there is a Stoic theology. There is a deep, deep metaphysic that underlies the Stoic framework that, that builds upon it the rest of the principles. So, Stoicism, and this is an argument that Kai Whiting will make much stronger than I. Kai Whiting is very strict with this. You cannot have the rest of the values of Stoicism unless the Stoic God comes along with it. It just doesn't work as a philosophy. But nonetheless, I think that just really taught me that, yeah, okay, they did talk about God. There is a theology, and it's fascinating to go into, and that was really just a turning point for me, where I started to say, okay, well, I need to explore this, because I don't want to be ignorant to these things, if there is value to be found, you might say.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's how God works in some ways, is that, I mean, whatever the God of your understanding is, right? Sort of that, well, maybe you weren't meant to see those passages. Maybe you weren't meant to have your eyes opened to God's presence in those texts yet. And I mean, maybe that man coming into your group and sort of being like, oh, this aha moment, like, and then going back and actually then seeking that part of it out, you probably got so much more out of that part of it when you were like, oh, wow, yes, it is here. Let me seek this out and find it, rather than, oh, God did this, God did that. Yeah, I mean, sometimes, like, right, you probably read it, but you glossed over it, right? So that's really fascinating to me. When you were writing your book, The Poet and the Sage, did you have like a practice? Like, was there like a spiritual grounding that you did, or any kind of meditation that you did to like sort of call in your higher power as you were getting into the flow of writing?
I would say that certainly routine was a good idea, but this was also, it was kind of, it was a time, I mean, the past year and a half really has just been so full of so many different influences on my mind. Uh, I remember at the end of 2020, yeah, just as we were going into 2021, my wife asked me, what was the best part about 2020 for you? And I remember my answer being, well, okay, there wasn't a specific best part, but the best thing about it to me was that I don't even recognize the way that I see the world now compared to how I saw the world a year ago. Because when you start really diving into these concepts and when you've got all of these influences of, moving in the direction of seeing the value of, say, theology and ideas around God, I think what starts to happen if you allow yourself to be taken into the adventure of what you're learning is your fundamental, metaphysical structure starts to shift. I think that through writing The Poet and the Sage, I really started to understand so much better the idea of fate that the Stoics talked about so much, and this idea that we have an individual nature within us that connects us to the nature of the whole, and we experience that through deep meaning, when we're in the right place at the right time doing the right thing, and when we are in that place, that internal joy is so vivid, and so we can get a sense for when we are in alignment with our own nature and the nature of the whole, as in how we contribute best to this complex reality that we're a part of. But I think that practically speaking, what I started to do was I definitely started making sure that my room was in the right setting. Like I love having, I love having a beautiful little light here. I've got my little things on the desk, like I get into a routine, this time every day I'm going to get in there, I'm going to write, and just allowing myself to I guess find ways to allow things to happen rather than for me to force them in a certain direction, whether that means being here in the right setting or going out into nature and going for a walk to beautiful places around the Sunshine Coast that I love, or but it is hard to say, because there were so many things going on for me at that time that really aided me in that process.
Right. Okay, cool. I like that, what you're saying, that just putting yourself in that environment, and I think just allowing those things to happen and getting into I guess like the system of it, right? Like I go here, I do this, or I'm going out in nature to be inspired. Like instead of like, oh, I gotta write today, or I have to do this thing. And so this comes up so much with like my health and wellness coaching, like trying to explain to people, like, let go of the goal, let go of I have to lose 30 pounds, 50 pounds, whatever it is. Like, right, I want to be a size 6, whatever. Like, let go of that. Fall in love with the process. Like, fall in love
Mm.
with, like you're saying, getting out into nature. What do you like to do? What are the foods you like to eat? Like, fall in love with discovering what healthy is to you, and like all those other peripheral things will come into focus. Like, I tell people, like the weight loss is just a side effect. It's one of the things that happens when everything else is in alignment, when everything else is working properly, and your body's healthy, and your mind's healthy, and your spirit's healthy. So I almost can see that, like, your process was very similar to that. Like, it wasn't just like, oh, I'm gonna sit down and write this book today, so I'm gonna say this prayer and do this book, right? So I love that. So is your style of like writing music similar to that?
Yeah, well, I don't necessarily write a lot of music, although the way that I kind of put my music together and compose, I guess, is really a process of improvisation and again allowing myself just to let go and see where it takes me. I think I saw a lot of growth as a pianist in the past year and a half, and a lot of that came from a deep intuition within me too, to not go down the path that is going to get me to be resentful about the fact that I'm playing piano. And I'll explain that, right? Because when I was younger, piano was an instrument that I absolutely loved, right? And I would make these little tunes on it, and I would, kind of improvise a little bit. I wasn't good at it, but, as a young kid, I clearly had a desire. And so my parents thought, great, we'll get him piano lessons. But about 3 weeks into piano lessons, I gave it all up. I was like, nah, I don't want to do it, because I was with this teacher who was like, play these notes here and these notes there and take this music home. And I was like, oh, I
Same.
could, yeah.
Same.
Couldn't
I
do
tell
it.
people, like, I learned enough piano so that I could be creative and write my own music. I just hated the structure of, reading the notes, and like, I don't know. I was like, well, this is how I feel it, and this is how I want to play it. And she would always be like, no, don't memorize the notes and then play it from memory. So I'm just really relating with what you're saying.
Well, yeah, I mean, and here's the thing, like what people shouldn't take away from me saying this is that there's no use in structure, right? Because like for some people, okay, well, let me explain it like this. At the university that I went to, I have a Bachelor of Music as well, right? And so the university that I went to, you had the classical department and you had the jazz department. And to me, it seems like, okay, clearly the people who are more creatively driven, to push the boundaries, go outside the boundaries, and to be hyper creative, they're going to be in the jazz department, because that's just where you go if you're this wild creative person, right? But then you might say the more conscientious people, the people who are going to be very, down the line, I want to learn the hardcore music theory and, how to play this perfectly line for line. It's like, they might go towards the classical department, right? So it's different types of people, right? And I'm just the kind of person who, like, as soon as you started talking to me about, you know, uh, rigid structure, I struggle with that deeply within my soul. And I understand that a lot of that is laziness. I get that, right? But nonetheless, the thing that I discovered for myself was just this method of structure and play. And so what I would do in my piano playing is I would sit down and I would say, okay, well, let's just let go and see where it takes me. I just start noodling around and, kind of find my own direction around the keys and see where it takes me. And then if I find myself amid all that chaos of playing around, if I find myself in a place that is kind of meditative and beautiful and a theme that I enjoy, then I'll stick with it and perhaps push myself through to really get that part. And so the structure and play, kind of nested in this method of allowing myself to let go. I saw that over a year of doing that personally, that for me, I saw massive growth in my piano playing, because, and here's the thing, I noticed that when I took on that strategy, I practiced piano over a year more than I had practiced singing or trumpet playing in my entire life. And I have a degree in those, right? and so the lesson for me was, you've got to find a structure that allows you to enjoy the process of learning, right? And to me as an artist, I wanted to go down that very chaotic path. For some people, it won't be. And I'll tell you, Crystal, that it just taught me, like, okay, piano was always the instrument that I loved, right? And I still love trumpet and I still love singing, but I'm so glad that I took that up. And that even inspired me to the point where I was on a trip with my wife up in northern Queensland last year, and I finally bought myself a real didgeridoo, because the didgeridoo was
That
my
is so
very
neat.
first instrument. It was my first instrument and I loved it. And I've always wanted to get into it a little bit more, but I thought, now's the time. Now I know that I need to go in the direction that my soul is telling me to go, and not in the direction that I have already gone, that kind of sunk value fallacy. So firstly, choose the instrument that you yourself adore and want to learn. Secondly, find a strategy that really works for you so that you love the process of learning it.
Yes. How fun is that? And I was resonating with what you were saying about some people really like the structure and some people really like the, I mean, it's not a total absence of structure, but it's more of like what you're saying, sort of like discovery and play, right? And obviously this is the playful life, so I'm very much about that. And I think when I coach and when I do things, it's very much about discovery. It's very much about, we'll try this, see if it works. If it doesn't, try something else and then add on another thing, right? It's not everybody who comes to me, I go, well, okay, you need to eat these foods and move this much a day and do these exercises. Like, I mean, that'd be ridiculous. Like, we're not all the same. So that's not the way everybody learns. And so, I love what you were saying about that. And I think how well that applies to like anything in life, not only learning music and being creative, but just even career wise, right? Like learning to live your truth and say, okay, I'm in this job or this career and it's really not what I wanted for myself. Maybe it's what other people wanted for me. Or like just to throw it back to like even your upbringing in the Mormon church, like not that you didn't have value there that you took with you now, but that, okay, you realize at some point, like this isn't what I want, or this is not the spiritual journey that I'm on. You know, take what you liked and leave the rest, I guess, right? Is one of those great phrases that comes to mind. Um, so so like what is next, I guess, Simon? Like what's your vision for, you know, this year, and how do you see like all these elements of your creativity and the podcast and the book, like how do you see this coming together? Because I can sense like from your energy and just your heart and following you that you have a real passion to serve. And, you know, I think like you said, right, when you were learning about stoicism, you're like, I want to help other people know about this. So I guess like where is that vision taking you now?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? We're really I guess I'm on this adventure of seeing what's coming next, you know, and when it comes, it's probably on the day of, you know. And so I only really see, you know, kind of like a day ahead at the moment. And I'm you know, doing so much at the moment. There are so many different things that are kind of coming together, and I feel like most of the time I'm balancing plates, you know, or spinning plates. But there are a few things that are really kind of on my radar as my major focus at the moment. You know, number one is really working on the walled garden. As you know, this is a collaboration that I'm doing with Sharon LaBelle and Kai Whiting, and these are two individuals who um, every day I'm grateful for the fact that somehow I managed to go from 2017 starting this podcast to now having two mentors who I genuinely love and adore, and you know, who I genuinely am excited about working with. And so you know, Sharon, Kai, and myself, we're doing this walled garden. We're interested in seeing where it goes, building this community and seeing what comes of it. So we're all in the same boat of being interested to not to kind of sit back, but to get involved with it and see what we can turn it into. And then obviously the book, I'm excited about that. You know, my goal with that is you know, as soon as we get to like 150 book sales, it's like then we get to the next book, and that's already prepared. I just need to you know, get to that. So I'm excited about that, and I'm excited to see how people relate to the book. And I guess also just with the Master of Divinity, that's another thing that is going to be really a big focus for me. So honestly, I'm just on that kind of artistic theological journey, and it's something that you know, every day I'm learning something new. Every day I'm experiencing something different. And I think that my biggest challenge is always to not get bogged down in the everyday kind of, you know, emails and business stuff and all this sort of stuff that is just, you know, sucking energy away from that ultimate purpose. So I will say that I think that my biggest thing at the moment is I'm setting up structures around me so that I can do exactly what I do best, and other people can help me to do that while they do what they do best, and we all work towards the same goal. So yeah, there's a lot coming this year, but we'll see where it goes. It's not going to be where I think it is.
Oh, of course. But that's the fun of it. That's the fun of it.
Yeah.
And I can totally relate. I mean, I am at the point now where I think I might just find like a virtual assistant somewhere online to like, here's all the things for the podcast, put it together, upload it. Because like, this is the part I enjoy, right? Connecting with you and having these conversations. But the part about it, like, I hate is like the video editing where I'm like, you know, like it just takes me forever.
Yeah, same. It kills me.
So maybe we need to find a good help, you know, some virtual help or something to take us to the next level here. But I just want to, for a moment, and I know, like, so I would encourage everybody listening, watching, like, go to thewallgarden.com and like just check out what it is, because I mean, if you give like a 3-minute, 5-minute synopsis, it's just, that's not enough, I feel, to really explain about what it is. But I guess like, I know what it is because I'm a part of it. But for somebody listening that's just meeting you for the first time, Simon, like, what is your, I guess, like your mission with that? Is it the community? Is it education? Is it a combination of both? Like, what are you really looking to achieve for people with that?
Yeah, well, I think let me sum it up like this. We had a meetup in the community about a week ago. Might have been 2 weeks ago. That's it. Yeah, time is just slowing down from here. But you know, we were discussing this great passage from Ralph Waldo Emerson, where he was talking about the time that the time that he was living in was one where people were writing histories and biographies and commentaries on the ancient, the wise people of the past. But he questioned whether people were actually having the experience of the enlightenment that they had. He said something like, why should not we have a poetry and a philosophy of insight and revelation to us, and not of like a tradition to theirs? So he was very interested in us having the experience of these ancient thinkers and seers and wise people and philosophers and theologians and mystics. He wanted to know how they felt. And I think that if there's one thing that really brings all of us together who are organizing the Walled Garden, it's we want to take people on the adventure of experiencing the divine, of experiencing that true joy that comes from philosophy when it is embodied wisdom and not simply some academic pursuit that can kind of be very up in the air and not very internalized, you might say. So, we're building a community around this shared value of let's go on this adventure together, of rediscovering the wisdom of these ancient Stoics, of course, because we're all embedded within that philosophy already. But nonetheless, we're interested in exploring, the symbolism behind the walled garden. I like how Jordan Peterson puts it. He said that the walled garden is a place where chaos can manifest itself creatively, right? And because the walled garden symbolically is a place where nature and culture harmonize, nature representing chaos, because you walk into a forest and it's like, chaos everywhere, but then culture is the ordering principle that brings things together and straight lines. And so the walled garden is a place where we bring nature and culture together, or chaos and order, in order to play effectively, so that we can all follow the deepest yearnings of our and intuitions of our hearts, and we can see where that adventure takes us. So I hope that gives people a better idea, but there are a few things that we're doing in there. We're doing regular meetup groups with various philosophers and professors, and with Kai, Sharon, and myself discussing topics that we believe are incredibly important for our modern times. Each of us are also doing individual mentoring with people, philosophical mentoring. So taking people on that adventure on a one-on-one basis. And we've got other opportunities coming up to expand, potentially even into working with companies and all sorts of things. So there's a lot that we're doing there, but people can get involved in the community by starting listening to the Walled Garden podcast, and see where we go.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And I love that. Like there's chaos, but then there's some order to it. And like, just, yeah, that idea of just play, just experience, just discover and see where it goes. So that's very exciting.
I will say this, Sharon LaBelle put it beautifully, and she puts everything beautifully, so there's no surprise there. But she said we need to make room for intentional innocence, right? Allow the deepest yearnings of our hearts to come out, no matter what they are, and in a spirit of mutual sharing of these values of philosophical and theological exploration. And if everybody agrees that what we're doing here is going on an adventure trying to experience that enlightenment, and that everybody's on that same path, then we can afford to take risks in our thinking, which we all should be doing, and see where it goes.
Yes. It's so crazy. I feel that I talk to so many adults, and I mean, health and wellness aside, it's like they don't really understand what they want, or they might have desires, but they push them down or they ignore them. And I think there's really some value in creating a space where people are allowed to be like in tune with their desires and what they want, and not afraid to express them and share them either. And I often think about like the structure of education, and how when you're ages 0 to 5, I mean, all of your learning comes from play and exploring. And I want this, how do I get this, right? It's all like, let me figure this out. Do I have to climb up on this table to get to this whatever cookie? It's all of that. And then we go to school, and it's very like structured, and you better have the right answer because we're going to judge you if you don't have the right answer. And so I think we learn this like way of being that's like, well, if I don't have the right answer, I better not say anything. And so we get very stuck in that place of, well, nobody has the answers to life. I mean, I feel, formal education prepares you for, a job and, maybe the structure of like that everyday living, but it does not prepare you for life, for the journey of life, and the journey of discovering who you are and what you want and who you want to be, and the journey that you want to be on with your soul and your spirit and all those things. So I love that you are creating that space for adults, because it gets lost somewhere. And in my field of expertise, that is what I am trying to do as well, is create that safe environment for people to be like in tune with what they want and what they desire, and play and figure it out and discover. So I absolutely love that.
Yeah, you're so right. And I think we never really stop playing as human beings, but perhaps we forget how to play well, and effectively. And we start playing games that we really don't want to be playing. And I think that is really when we feel most out of alignment with our true selves. Is I hate that true self, because it's difficult to know exactly what that is or where it's found. But nonetheless, we just need to learn how to play better, how to be more authentic, more open to new experiences, more open to the experience of taking a risk. I'll tell you this. I hope we have time. Do you have time for one more little
yes, of course.
rant? Because one of the things that I started doing a couple of years ago, when I was, I had just quit my job as a gym manager, and I was going out on a limb and saying, cool, I'm going to do my coaching full time. And, I really didn't want to go down the path of the standard kind of really sleazy coach marketing, like, hey, come and get my free ebook. It's not free, because then they're going to send you like 10,000 emails, and you're going to get sick of them. And I've never bought from a person who does that sort of stuff. And I just thought, let's see if I can get clients just by doing well on the podcast and being myself and exploring questions that I think are important. And I survived through 2 years. Perhaps I didn't thrive in terms of, having more clients than I knew what to do with, but the clients that I had were incredible people, and I built amazing relationships, and I did survive financially by playing the game that I wanted to play, and by not, giving in to the allure of this kind of marketing. And now I'm in that stage again where we're rebranding everything. We're in the walled garden. And I'm thinking, okay, cool. I want to take on 5 more clients this year. How am I going to do that? It's not as simple as me just advertising in every show and saying, hey, listen, I do coaching as well, because, now I've got Sharon, I've got Kai. So we've got to do this together now. And I was reading this article, Crystal, yesterday on Forbes about the state of marketing in the coaching industry. And it was funny because this article was saying, well, it's no longer as easy as it used to be to get clients as a coach, right? And the reason is because trust in marketing or coaching products is at an all-time low. And I thought that makes perfect sense, because I don't trust coaches and I don't trust marketing. And I'm, like everybody, a modern consumer who is faced with over 4,000 images of marketing every single day.
Right.
And what I thought was interesting was their solution to that problem was not to say, okay, what needs to happen? If there's a lack of trust, then we need to have greater integrity as marketers, or we need to be more trustworthy coaches. We need to focus on the true value that we're adding to people. No, their approach was, so what we need is more marketing, right? And what we need is we need for people to have 6 interactions before they are going to hand over their money to you. And so you need to send them into this funnel and send them into this and send them to that. And I was like, it seems like the wrong approach. And it just gives me a disgusting feeling at the bottom of my stomach. And I want to avoid that style as much as I possibly can. And so it's difficult, because what you have to say is like, am I going to be led by my internal values and go on the adventure that I want to go on? Because if you do that, you might have no clients. Who knows? You might not get anything, and you might you might not get the financial success that you want, but you will have the internal joy of knowing that you are not going against your most fundamental principles. And the question is always, do you truly believe that that would be better than all of the wealth that you could possibly have?
Right.
That feeling of being in alignment with your inner values. And that's what the ancient philosophers tried to teach us, like principles first, values first, money,
Yes.
wealth, success, all that sort of stuff. If it comes, accept it. But if it doesn't, you can't go against your values. So it's tough. It's tough, because
it's very hard for us to be stoic coaches.
And look, here's the thing. I mean, like I have respect for marketers, absolutely. And they do a very important job, because, sometimes you have a product that you really want to get out there to people. And I think what I'm talking about is we need to be way more creative with the way that we think about actually getting the word out to people than simply, create this ebook and get them to go in this funnel here. And even just the language, Crystal, it's like the language they use. Think about this. What's the language that you would hear all the time from people who are teaching you how to market your services? Okay, we need to drive traffic into a funnel, right? Okay, so when you say that, as Stoics, we understand that language means something, and it teaches me something about the way that you see people and the world, teaches me something about how you will treat me. If I'm talking about my potential clients or students or mentees, as in I need to drive traffic to a funnel, essentially what that means is that I see human beings as cows that I need to herd onto a truck into my factory so that they can hand me more money. That's what that language teaches you about a person. And so I think that, when I see that their solution was like more marketing, I thought, it's just a little bit on the icky side. And I'm going to try and be more creative with the approach here, and try and, see if I can, set up our business so that we never have to we never have to push our marketing out there to try and trick people into being with us, but nonetheless we can, bring people into our adventure by the goods of our soul, and by that kind of connection. So
absolutely. I am totally on that page with you. And my dad would always tell me throughout my life, like, integrity speaks for itself, and it speaks very loudly, right? That people notice. I think at this point, people know when they're being marketed to. I mean, you and I know. I mean, maybe it's just because we're in this world, but like you said, right? You know when somebody's going, download this free thing, and then you get on this email list, and then they're emailing you 7 times a day and buy this. I mean, it's, you just have to go through it with a fine comb and be like, okay, what is valuable here to me? And I love that I think stoicism helps people like you and me, like, let go of the desire to want to achieve more, to want to gain more followers, to want to have more clients, more money, right? And sort of like that, well, let me let go of the outcome. If I just sit here in my principles, come at this like as a real person with real values, and make those connections, I have to just trust and believe, right? Like you were talking earlier about fate and faith. Like, I have to have faith that the right people are going to find me, and when they do, like, I will help transform their lives. But I very much like do not like TikTok. I feel like TikTok is the exact opposite of what I am trying to help people deal with in the world. Like, I'm trying to get people to sit down and journal and be introspective and like give things more than 15 seconds of attention. And so, I feel it's a real compromise of my values as a person, as a coach, to be on TikTok. Like, and I think the people who would find me there are not going to resonate with my message either, because they're on that platform for a reason, because they like it. Right. So they're going to get with me and be like, oh man, this is taking forever. We talk for an hour about gratitude, like,
Yeah, and it's tough, right? Because like the problem that we would always have with this sort of thing is perhaps those are the people who need it most, who are, on these platforms, just, addicted to social media every day. And, we at the Walled Garden are now kind of, I've gone without social media for a while, and now we're kind of just jumping back on it, and thinking about what is our approach here? How are we going to set this up so that we do not feel as though we are, constantly on this, platform, but nonetheless, how do we set it up so that we can bring people towards what we're doing, and perhaps help them to, to not be so trapped in that world of likes and shares and all this sort of stuff. And it's there's no simple solution, but certainly you will feel better if you go as your own adventure and stick to your own values, and do not compromise those sorts of things. So it's complex.
Absolutely, it is. And I honor you, Simon, because I feel that I needed to receive this message today, and that this conversation has really been very helpful and like supportive to me. So I honor you for being here and being so open and sharing with me today. I really do.
Well, Crystal, it's been so beautiful, and you just have just such an awesome spirit about you. Like, I love it, and so I'll talk to you as much as you want to talk to me, right? And happy birthday as well. I don't know if your audience knows that we're doing this interview on your birthday, which is unbelievable that you wanted to talk to me on your birthday, but nonetheless, I'm honored, and I hope you have an amazing day. This has been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And real quick, I know I will link all this in the show notes, but where would be the best place that we can find you?
So people can find me. They can go to simonjedrew.com. Would be absolutely fine to go there. You can also go to thewalledgarden.com. And if people are interested in picking up The Poet and the Sage, which I highly recommend because it is the goods of my soul, and I believe that it has the power to be a transformative work in people's lives. And like I said at the start of the episode, I didn't write this book because somebody said the market wants a book on stoicism. It's not a book on stoicism. It is a book of true exploration of philosophical and theological principles. And so if people want that, then they can go to thewalledgarden.com, just go to the store there and they can grab it.
Perfect. All right. I will be transparent. I haven't gotten my copy yet, but I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to order it and get it because I can't wait. I've heard you talk about it and have these conversations. I'm like, I need to get my hands on this book. So everybody listening.
I'd be honored for you to have a copy. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you. Awesome. We'll do that. All right, Simon. Well, Godspeed to you, and be blessed in all that you do. And once again, hopefully we'll be chatting soon.
Thank you, Crystal. Yeah, happy birthday, and we'll talk to you next time. Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. If someone you love would benefit from this message, please, please share this podcast with them. And if you want more out of your life, not just surviving every day, but you want to truly thrive, visit me at krystalizedhealthadvisors.com or on Facebook to schedule your free dream strategy call with me today. Do not hesitate any longer. Life is short, and I want you to truly live the playful life. I will see you next time, and as always, stay playful.